Here's something that might surprise you, Daniel. The man who literally wrote our Constitution was barely taller than a middle schooler. At just 5 feet 4 inches, James Madison proved that physical stature has nothing to do with leaving a massive historical legacy.
That's such an interesting detail about Madison GRANNA, especially since his wife Dolley called him the Great Little Madison. His impact on American democracy was significantly greater than his physical presence.
Well, speaking of impact, most people don't realize just how prepared Madison was when he showed up at the Constitutional Convention. He spent months studying political systems from around the world, reading hundreds of books Jefferson sent him from France.
Hmm. And he was only 36 years old at the time. Can you imagine having that kind of responsibility at that age?
You know what's even more remarkable? He basically became the convention's unofficial secretary, taking detailed notes of every single debate. Without those notes, we'd have lost so much of our understanding about how the Constitution came to be.
Granted, then he had to convince everyone to actually accept it, right? That's where the Federalist Papers came in, those essays he wrote with Hamilton and Jay that are still studied in law schools today.
Exactly, Daniel. And here's something fascinating about that collaboration. Madison and Hamilton had completely different writing styles. Madison was this methodical academic writer, while Hamilton was known for his passionate, forceful arguments. But together, they created something extraordinary.
Well, that reminds me of how Madison and his wife, Dolley, complemented each other too. He was this quiet intellectual, while she was incredibly charismatic and social.
Oh man, Dolly Madison was amazing during the War of 1812. When the British were about to burn Washington, she had the presence of mind to save that famous portrait of George Washington we still have today, along with crucial state papers.
That's such a decisive moment in our history. The First Lady literally saving pieces of our national heritage while the enemy was at the gates.
You know what's really interesting about Madison? He actually changed his political views significantly over his lifetime. He began as a strong Federalist, working closely with Hamilton, but later aligned himself more closely with Jefferson's Democratic Republican views.
So, if we're talking about political evolution, doesn't that kind of challenge the way some people today treat the Constitution as this unchangeable document?
Absolutely correct. Madison himself said the Constitution should be interpreted in light of changing circumstances. He understood that a living document needed to grow with the nation.
And yet, he was incredibly systematic about how he approached these changes, wasn't he? Like with the Bill of Rights, he initially opposed it, but then became its primary architect.
That's exactly right, and it shows something crucial about his character. When he changed his mind, he didn't just grudgingly go along, he threw himself completely into making it work. He was pragmatic, but also thorough.
Well, that makes me think about his writings on political parties and factions. He seemed to really understand human nature and its impact on politics.
Oh man, his warnings about factions in Federalist Number 10 feel like they could have been written yesterday. He discussed the dangers of groups prioritizing their own interests over the common good. Sound familiar?
That's so relevant to today's political climate. How did he propose dealing with these factions?
Here's what's fascinating. He didn't think you could eliminate them. Instead, he designed a system of checks and balances to contain their effects. That's why we have separation of powers, federalism, all these structural safeguards.
What strikes me as particularly relevant is the way he combined strong principles with practical flexibility. That seems like something we could really use more of today.
Exactly. And here's what I think is his most important legacy. He showed that real political achievement doesn't come from grandstanding or refusing to compromise. It comes from careful thought, detailed planning, and a willingness to work with others to find practical solutions.
So, in other words, GRANNA, the father of the Constitution, was actually teaching us about the art of the possible.
Well, Daniel, that's what makes his example so valuable today. He demonstrated that it's possible to hold strong principles while still being willing to listen, learn, and adapt. In our current political climate, that might be the most important lesson we could learn from him.